What looks like a simple failure is often just a different kind of success. This is the story of a quiet man, a judgmental teacher, and the moment a routine parent-teacher conference became a public shamming. A story about sacrifice, hidden identity, and the quiet dignity of choosing family over fame. If you stay with me, you'll discover why the most accomplished person in the room is sometimes the one who looks like he's done the least. It happens in a place designed for community, the school auditorium during parent-teacher night, where well-meaning educators can, in a moment of frustration, mistake a parent's quiet struggle for indifference, and where one teacher's public criticism of a seemingly disengaged single father was about to unravel into the most humiliating retreat of her career. Because the man she was shamming had already changed the world. He just chose to stop telling people about it. To understand how this moment exploded, you have to meet Leo Mercer. To the other parents at Pinewood Elementary, he was just the quiet, slightly disheveled dad in the navy sweater who always arrived exactly 5 minutes before pickup. He helped with the occasional science fair project about volcanoes or constellations, spoke in soft, measured tones, and seemed perpetually tired. What they didn't see was the meticulously organized calendar on his kitchen wall, color-coded for his daughter Emma's school schedule, his part-time remote work, and the twice-weekly grocery runs that kept their small world running. A world he had built, alone, for the past 3 years. Leo's life was a study in quiet containment. His days began at 5:30 a.m., making lunches, reviewing Emma's homework from the night before, and scanning academic journals, not for his own work, but to distill complex concepts into simple answers for a curious 8-year-old. His career, the one that had once consumed him, existed now only as a faint background hum. He had been Dr. Leo Mercer, a pioneering astrophysicist whose work on quantum lattice models had cracked a problem that stumped his field for decades. The call from Stockholm came on a Tuesday morning in October. He was 32 years old. The photograph in the newspaper showed a young man with wild hair and a dazzling, triumphant smile, standing beside a chalkboard dense with equations. But that man seemed like a character from someone else's biography. The defining event wasn't the prize, but what followed 18 months later, the sudden catastrophic illness of his wife, Clara, a brilliant neuroscientist in her own right. Her diagnosis was a brutal, fast-moving form of brain cancer. The 16 months that followed were a blur of hospitals, experimental treatments, and a slow, heartbreaking fade. Leo took a leave of absence from his university position. The Nobel medal, still in its velvet-lined case, was packed into a storage box with Clara's research notes and their wedding album. When she died, his world didn't just shrink, it reoriented entirely around a single sacred point: Emma. He made a choice that shocked his colleagues and bewildered his department head. He resigned his tenured professorship. He sold their large home near the university and bought a modest townhouse in the suburbs, zoned for Pinewood Elementary. He left the world of international conferences, peer review, and groundbreaking discovery for a world of parent-teacher associations, fractions homework, and convincing an 8-year-old that broccoli wasn't a form of punishment. To the academic world, it was a tragic waste of a luminous mind. To Leo, it was the only equation that mattered. He was swapping one universe of complexity for another. On the other side of this collision was Mrs. Elena Brennan, Pinewood's veteran 5th-grade teacher. With 26 years in the classroom, her hair in a severe bun and glasses perpetually perched on her nose, she was a fixture. She believed in rigor, structure, and parental accountability. Her classroom rules were legendary. Printed in a 10-point manifesto, she emailed home the first week of school. Research like that from the national PTA shows student performance improves with engaged parents, and Mrs. Brennan took this as a sacred charge. But her definition of engaged was narrow and rigid, attending every meeting, signing every planner daily, and providing the prescribed 30 minutes of homework supervision each night. This philosophy collided with the messy reality of modern parenting. A recent NPR investigation found discrimination complaints against schools at record highs, often rooted in a failure to accommodate diverse family structures. Mrs. Brennan saw Leo Mercer as a prime example of the problem. Emma was a bright but daydreaming child, and her homework was often incomplete or contained unusual, abstract answers. The weekly parent signature in her planner was frequently missing. Mrs. Brennan had sent 4 polite, then progressively firmer emails. She requested a meeting twice. Leo had apologized each time, citing scheduling conflicts with his remote work deadlines. To her, it was a pattern of neglect. She didn't see a father doing the work of 2 parents. She saw a parent who couldn't be bothered. The stage was set in Pinewood's fluorescent-lit auditorium for the annual curriculum night. The room buzzed with the anxious energy of parents juggling evening schedules. Leo sat near the back, Emma asleep against his shoulder after a long day. He was mentally composing a grocery list when Mrs. Brennan took the microphone for the 5th grade presentation. She spoke passionately about academic benchmarks and the importance of the homeschool partnership. Then her tone shifted. "I must address a concerning trend," she said, her voice sharpening. "Some students are coming to class unprepared, consistently. This isn't a failure of the child, but a failure of support at home. When basic responsibilities like reviewing homework are treated as optional, it tells your child their education is optional." A few parents shifted uncomfortably. Leo kept his eyes down, gently adjusting Emma's weight. "For example," Mrs. Brennan continued, her gaze sweeping the room and landing deliberately on the back row, "Emma Mercer is a lovely girl with great potential, but her work is consistently unsigned, and her math responses show a clear lack of guided practice. Mr. Mercer, we've emailed, we've called. At a certain point, a parent simply has to make their child learning a priority." Cold silence fell. Every head in the auditorium turned to look at Leo. He felt a hot flush crawl up his neck. This wasn't a private critique, it was a public indictment. He saw the mixture of pity and judgment in the faces looking back at him. He opened his mouth to say something, to explain about his work deadlines, about managing everything alone, but the words died in his throat. He simply gave a small, tight nod and looked away, focusing on the steady rise and fall of Emma's breathing. The humiliation was a physical weight. As the meeting adjourned, parents flowed toward the exit, giving him a wide berth. He moved mechanically, settling Emma into her car seat. His hands were trembling. In the driver's seat, he sat in the dark parking lot for a long time, the teacher's words echoing. A failure of support at home. He had given up everything to be that support. The irony was a bitter taste. But in the auditorium, another parent had been watching the exchange with growing unease. Sarah Chen, a software engineer whose son was in Emma's class, had always found Leo's calm demeanor intriguing. As Mrs. Brennan singled him out, Sarah noticed something else. Leo's reaction wasn't one of guilt or anger, but of a profound, weary dignity. It didn't fit. Later, at home, the scene bothered her. On a whim, she opened her laptop. She remembered Leo mentioning once, in passing at a birthday party, that he'd worked in physics. She typed his name into the search bar. The first result was a Wikipedia page. Her eyes scanned the opening lines and she froze. She clicked on the Images tab. There side by side was a photo of a younger, beaming Leo in a tuxedo receiving a medal from the King of Sweden and the quiet dad from the school parking lot. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. The narrative that had just played out in the auditorium shattered into 1,000 pieces. She immediately opened her phone, her thumb hovering over the school's parent group chat. The truth was a loaded weapon, and she was about to pull the trigger. Sarah Chen's message to the Pinewood parent group chat contained only 3 words and a link. "Look at this." The link led to the Nobel Prize website's biography page for Dr. Leo Mercer. For 37 seconds, there was only the ticking indicator that people were typing. Then, the digital dam broke. The first response was a single question mark, then an exclamation point, then a flood of emojis, mind-blown faces, clapping hands, crying, laughing icons, as 37 parents processed the same impossible information. The quiet dad who'd just been shamed was a Nobel laureate in physics. The man criticized for not helping with 5th grade math homework had literally rewritten the rules of quantum mechanics. Screenshots of the Wikipedia page, the official Nobel announcement, and archival news articles began to flood the chat. Someone found a photo from the awards ceremony. The contrast was devastating. There was Leo, years younger, standing proudly beside his wife Clara in Stockholm City Hall, and here was the same man, alone and exhausted in a school auditorium. The conversation shifted from shock to outrage. She humiliated a Nobel Prize winner for missing SIGNATURES. My God, his wife died. He's doing this alone. The tone turned toward Mrs. Brennan. Links to articles about educational shamming practices were shared, including the Brookings Institution reports stating that shamming is the worst method of teaching because it manipulates fear of alienation. The public critique was now being publicly tried, but the story was already leaking beyond the encrypted bubble of the parent chat. A local community Facebook page, run by a retiree who loved neighborhood drama, picked it up. The post was vague but tantalizing. Pinewood teacher goes after single dad, wait till you hear who he really is. It got 82 shares in an hour. Leo Mercer was completely unaware of this digital tsunami. He was at home, helping Emma with a model of the solar system, meticulously painting a tiny Saturn. His phone, face down on the kitchen counter, began to vibrate. Then it stopped. Then it vibrated again in a rapid, insistent sequence. Text notifications, then missed call alerts, then the ping of social media tags. He ignored it, assuming it was spam. The first call he answered was from a number he didn't recognize, with a 212 area code. New York City. Dr. Mercer, this is Ben Crawford with the Daily Herald. We'd love to get a comment on the incident at your daughter's school tonight. Leo's blood ran cold. I'm sorry, what incident? Who is this? The PTA meeting. We understand a teacher publicly criticized you, and it's come to light that you're a Nobel laureate. Our readers would love to hear your side. Leo ended the call without another word. He stared at the phone as if it had bitten him. Then he opened the parent group chat. He had to scroll up through hundreds of messages, a cascading waterfall of shock, sympathy, and fury, all orbiting the fact of his former identity. He saw the links, the photos, the dissection of his life, the privacy he had fought so hard to curate for himself, and Emma had been vaporized in under an hour. A profound sense of violation washed over him, followed by a sharper fear. What would this do to Emma? Across town, Elena Brennan was enjoying a cup of tea, satisfied she had finally made her point clear. The public critique was a tool she used sparingly but effectively. It spurred action. Her phone buzzed with a text from another teacher. Elena, you might want to check the parent chat. She opened it, her brow furrowed. As she read, the color drained from her face. The teacup rattled in its saucer. This wasn't possible. This was some sort of elaborate, cruel prank. She clicked the Wikipedia link, then the Nobel Committee page. The evidence was irrefutable, documented by the most prestigious institution on Earth. The man she had called out for negligence was one of the most accomplished scientists of his generation. Her critique hadn't been about homework, it had been a verdict on his character, on his dedication as a parent. And that verdict was now catastrophically, publicly wrong. Her immediate reaction was a hollow, sinking horror. Then came the defensive anger. He should have said something. Why would he hide that? It was deceptive. But the anger couldn't withstand the next wave of messages. Parents began posting snippets of research about single-parent households, about the Fawcett Society's data showing over 249,000 mothers had left their jobs due to childcare pressures, framing Leo not as negligent, but as a statistic of profound sacrifice. The narrative was solidifying against her, and it was a narrative with the weight of both moral authority and cold, hard facts. By 11 p.m., the story had legs. A local TV news producer saw the Facebook post and assigned a reporter. The angle was irresistible, the ultimate underdog story, the arrogant educator versus the hidden genius. It ticked every box for viral engagement. The reporter, a woman named Anya Petrova, started making calls. She called the school district's main office, asking for comment on a potential incident of public shamming involving a Nobel laureate parent. She called Mrs. Brennan's home phone. She called Leo again. The principal of Pinewood Elementary, David Kwon, was awakened by the district superintendent at 11:45 p.m. David, we have a situation. It's about to be on the news. Check your email. Principal Kwon, a pragmatic man in his 50s, read the forwarded chain from the parent chat and the increasingly alarmed emails from district communications. His stomach knotted. This was a reputational wildfire. He drafted a carefully worded email to all staff, urging discretion and reminding them of professional conduct policies. But it was like closing the barn door after the prize horse had not only bolted, but given a televised interview on its way out. Next morning, Leo drove Emma to school as usual, but the atmosphere had changed. The The parking lot was not just full of minivans, it contained two local news vans, their satellite dishes raised like mechanical ears. Parents clustered in small groups, their conversations stopping as he walked by, replaced by stares he could feel on his back. He kept his hand on Emma's shoulder, guiding her toward the door. A reporter detached herself from a van and approached, microphone in hand. Dr. Mercer. Anya Petrova, Channel 7. Do you have a response to last night's events? Do you feel the school failed you? Leo didn't break stride. No comment. Please, my daughter is here. He positioned himself between Emma and the camera, a human shield. Inside the school, the hallways hummed with a different energy. Teachers looked at him with a mixture of awe and acute embarrassment. Children, sensing the drama but not understanding it, whispered. Emma looked up at him, confused. Why was that lady with the camera talking to you, Daddy? It's nothing, sweetheart, a misunderstanding. He delivered her to her classroom door, where her teacher, a young woman named Miss Alvarez, greeted him with wide eyes. Mr. Mercer, Dr. Mercer, we're all, she stammered. He just shook his head, gave Emma a quick hug, and retreated. He didn't go home. He went to the one place he could think, the public library. He needed silence and anonymity. He sat at a carrel in the science section, surrounded by books containing the knowledge he had once helped expand. He put his head in his hands. The choice he had made to trade his career for his daughter had been a private calculation of love and grief. Now it was a public parable being dissected and weaponized. He wasn't a father anymore, he was a symbol. A symbol of parental sacrifice, of institutional failure, of hidden greatness. He hated it. Meanwhile, in her classroom, Elena Brennan was trying to teach a lesson on the water cycle, but the children were restless and her own focus was shattered. During her planning period, Principal Kwan summoned her to his office. The meeting was brief and tense. He didn't yell. His disappointment was quieter and worse. Elena, what were you thinking? We have policies about addressing parental concerns privately, and now this. He gestured to his computer screen, where a local news site had the story as its leading headline. Nobel dad shamed at PTA, school faces backlash. He never told anyone, David, she said, her voice tight. That's not the point. His accomplishments aren't the point. The point is you publicly questioned a parent's commitment based on incomplete information. You made the school and the district look prejudiced and cruel. The superintendent is getting calls. The school board is getting emails. What do you want me to do? For now, teach your class. Do not speak to the media. The district's communications director is drafting a statement. We'll likely need you to issue a private and probably a public apology. The word apology hit her like a physical blow. Apologize for enforcing standards, for expecting parental involvement. It felt like a betrayal of her entire philosophy. But the weight of the evidence, not just his prize, but the story of his wife's death, his abandonment of his career, constructed a narrative where she was the villain. She returned to her empty classroom, the walls decorated with student posters about perseverance and kindness, and felt like a hypocrite. By 3 p.m., the story was trending on social media platforms outside the local area. The core elements were too perfect: elite achievement, tragic loss, humble parenthood, and a tone-deaf authority figure. A major national news website picked it up, framing it within the broader, researched context of the motherhood penalty and the career sacrifices made by parents, particularly after loss. Comment sections became battlegrounds. Some defended Mrs. Brennan, arguing teachers are overworked and parents need to be accountable, but most of the tide was against her, and it was turning vicious. Leo, still at the library, made his only outgoing call to Sarah Chen. "Why did you do it?" he asked, his voice weary, not angry. Sarah sounded heartbroken. "Leo, I'm so sorry. I was just so angry for you. It felt so unfair. I thought people should know who they were talking to. I didn't imagine it would blow up like this." "It doesn't matter who I was," he said quietly. "It only matters who I am, and who I am is Emma's dad. That's all I wanted to be here." That evening, as he made dinner, the doorbell rang. It was Anya Petrova, the reporter, and a cameraman. "Dr. Mercer, please, 5 minutes. People want to hear from you. This story is about more than just one meeting. It's about how we treat each other." She was good. She appealed not to vanity, but to purpose. Leo looked past her, saw a few neighbors watching from their windows. The story wouldn't go away unless he addressed it. He had a choice: hide and let the narrative be shaped by others, or step into the light and try to reclaim it. For Emma's sake, he knew he had to speak, but the words he was about to say would change everything for himself, for the teacher who shamed him, and for the very idea of what it means to be seen. Leo Mercer opened his door to the reporter, and in doing so, he opened a valve he could not close. He didn't invite her in, but stood on his front step, the cameraman's light bathing him in a harsh, revealing glow. Anya Petrova's first question was gentle. "Dr. Mercer, the world knows you as a Nobel laureate, but at your daughter's school, you were treated as an uninvolved parent. How does that feel?" Leo took a breath, choosing each word with the precision of a man writing an equation. "It doesn't matter what I achieved in the past. What matters is that I am Emma's father now. I made a choice to be present for her completely after we lost her mother. That choice means some things, like signing a planner every single night, sometimes get missed. It doesn't mean I don't care. It means I'm doing my best." He wasn't defensive. He wasn't angry. His tone was one of profound, weary explanation. He continued, "My daughter's teacher saw an incomplete homework sheet. She didn't see the hours I spent that night explaining the concept behind the problem in 6 different ways until my daughter understood it. She saw a missing signature. She didn't see the parent-teacher conference I had to miss because I was at my only job's mandatory quarterly review, which pays our rent." Then he delivered the line that would be quoted for weeks. "Accomplishment isn't a shield against struggle. Sometimes it's the reason the struggle is invisible." The interview lasted 4 minutes. He asked for his daughter's privacy, thanked the community for their support, and gently closed the door. The segment aired at 6 p.m. It was a masterclass in quiet devastation. It didn't attack Mrs. Brennan. It simply exposed the vast, unseen landscape of a single parent's life. The public reactions shifted from outrage to a more profound, collective shame. The school district's official statement, released an hour later, was a study in corporate caution. It expressed deep regret for any distress caused and emphasized a commitment to supportive, private communication with all families. It did not name Mrs. Brennan. It did not apologize. To many, it read as cowardly. The online fury, now directed at the district's evasion, intensified. But then came the twist, the "wait, it gets worse" moment. It didn't come from a reporter or a parent. It came from a former student. A woman named Chloe, now in her 20s, saw the news story and recognized her 5th-grade teacher. She posted a long, emotional thread on a social media platform. "Elena Brennan didn't just shame a Nobel winner. She has a pattern. I was the poor kid in class, with thrift store clothes and free lunch. She once held up my mismatched socks and told the class that some people's parents don't care enough to prepare them properly. I'm 30 now, and I still remember the heat in my face." Chloe's post was a spark in dry grass. Others began to share. A man recalled being forced to apologize to the class for forgetting his textbook, which his family couldn't afford to replace. A parent told how Mrs. Brennan had suggested her son's ADHD was a result of lazy parenting. These were anecdotes, not a formal dossier, but they formed a pattern. The story was no longer about one misjudgment. It was about a teaching philosophy rooted in public humiliation. Experts cited in follow-up news articles connected it to the Brookings research on shamming's corrosive effects. Mrs. Brennan was no longer just a teacher who'd made a mistake. She was becoming a symbol of a punitive, outdated educational approach. The school board announced an emergency closed-door meeting. The district superintendent held a conference call with the principals. The pressure was no longer just reputational, it was legal and systemic. Discrimination complaints against schools were already at record highs, as noted in recent NPR reporting. The district's lawyers were now involved, warning of a potential hostile environment claim. Inside her home, Elena Brennan watched Leo's interview. She saw his calm, his pain, and his absolute lack of malice toward her. It was worse than if he had screamed. It forced her to see him not as an abstract, negligent parent, but as a human being. Then she read the emerging stories from former students. The defense she had clung to, that she was enforcing standards, began to crumble. She was forced to confront the unintended damage woven into her methods. The realization was a private earthquake. She did something she had not done in 26 years of teaching. She called in sick the next day, not for strategy, but because she genuinely could not face her classroom. She sat at her kitchen table and wrote a letter, not to the district or to the school board, She wrote it to Leo and Emma Mercer. It was 3 pages long, handwritten. In it, she did not justify her actions. She apologized, specifically and unreservedly. She admitted she had made assumptions based on a narrow view of parental engagement. She acknowledged his sacrifice and the invisible labor he performed every day. She wrote, "I was so focused on the signature on the page, I forgot to see the father behind the pencil." She sealed it in an envelope, but she did not send it, not yet. The media cycle, having chewed through the outrage, now hungered for a resolution. Pundits debated cancel culture in education. Talk shows discussed the pressures on single parents. A national morning show invited Leo to appear live via satellite from his home. They offered a 5-figure donation to a charity of his choice. It was the ultimate pressure to become a spokesperson for a cause he never sought. Leo declined. He issued a brief statement through a temporary email account. "Thank you for the interest. Our family needs peace, not platform. We respectfully request privacy as we navigate this." His refusal to monetize or amplify the drama was itself a story. It painted him as even more dignified, which in turn increased the pressure on the school district to act decisively. Principal Kwon was given his directive: resolve the situation before it escalated to a lawsuit or a formal board vote. He arranged 2 separate meetings, one with Leo, one with Elena. He would act as mediator. The goal was a private resolution that could be framed publicly as a mutual understanding. Leo agreed to meet on one condition: it would be at the school after hours with no one else present. No district officials, no union representatives, just the 2 of them. He was not coming for an apology. He was coming to set a boundary for his daughter's education. Elena, clutching the unsent letter, agreed. The night of the meeting, the hallway of Pinewood Elementary was empty and echoing. The 2 adults sat in Principal Kwon's office, the diplomas and awards on the walls witnessing the confrontation. Principal Kwon began with formalities, but Leo cut him off, speaking directly to Mrs. Brennan for the first time since the auditorium. "I don't care about the news stories," he said, his voice low. "I care about my daughter. She loves school. She comes home talking about science experiments and library books. After last week, she asked me if her teacher hates her. That is the only thing that matters to me." Elena Brennan looked at him, and the professional armor she had worn for decades was gone. She was just a tired woman facing the consequence of a mistake that had grown into a catastrophe. "I don't hate her," she said, her voice thick. "I never did. And I don't hate you. I misjudged you profoundly. I am so sorry." She slid the handwritten letter across the desk. Leo didn't open it. He let it lie between them. "An apology to me is one thing. What matters is what happens in your classroom tomorrow and every day after. Emma needs to feel safe there. She needs to feel that her work is judged on its merit, not on her father's signature." What happened next was the pivotal shift. Elena Brennan didn't just apologize, she offered a proposal. She asked if Leo would be willing, when his schedule allowed, to come and speak to her class, not as a chastised parent, but as a scientist, to talk about stars or curiosity, or how asking questions is more important than memorizing answers. It was an olive branch, but also an admission. She was asking him to share the expertise she had once dismissed. Leo was silent for a long time. He saw the strategic value for the district, a tidy, redemptive ending. He also saw the potential value for Emma to see her father respected in her own classroom, but he also saw the trap of performance. He finally said, "I will think about it, but my priority is Emma's ordinary school day. Can you assure me that will be protected?" Principal Kwon, seeing a path forward, intervened. He proposed a formal addendum to Emma's file, noting that communication about homework would be handled via private email, not through the planner system. It was a small, bureaucratic fix, but it was a tangible change. Leo agreed. The meeting ended with a tense, but not hostile, handshake. As Leo drove home, he felt the heavy weight of the spotlight beginning to lift, replaced by the fragile hope of normalcy. But the story was not done with them, because the next morning, as Elena Brennan prepared to return to her classroom, she received an email from the district's Human Resources Department. It requested her presence at a meeting to discuss recent events and professional development. It was not a disciplinary hearing. It was something potentially more transformative and more terrifying. They weren't firing her. They were asking her to publicly change, and the whole world would be watching to see if she could. The professional development was not a punishment, but a provocation. Elena Brennan's mandated training wasn't about classroom management, it was about perspective. Over 4 weeks, she sat through seminars on family trauma, the invisible labor of single parents, and the documented effects of socioeconomic stress on student performance. She read the Fawcett Society data about mothers leaving careers. She reviewed the Brookings research on shamming. For the first time in her career, she was on the receiving end of instruction, and it was humbling in an entirely new way. The district wasn't trying to fire her, they were investing in forcing her to see what she had missed. Meanwhile, a fragile new routine settled over the Mercer household. The media calls dwindled, the news vans left. The parent chat, after a final flurry of support, moved on to discussing the spring fundraiser. Emma's school life, protected by Principal Kwan's discreet intervention, returned to normal. The homework planner was set aside, replaced by a simple daily email check-in. It was a small, practical fix that acknowledged one fundamental truth. The system had failed to accommodate a parent's reality, and so the system bent. Leo kept his word. He thought about Elena's invitation to speak to the class. He decided against a grand lecture about physics. Instead, one Tuesday in May, he volunteered for Career Day, not as Dr. Leo Mercer, Nobel laureate, but as Leo, Emma's dad, who used to work with science. He brought in a simple demonstration about light refraction with a prism, speaking less about quantum theory and more about curiosity. He answered questions about rainbows and lasers. He watched Emma watch him, her face a mixture of pride and profound relief that her dad was just a dad again, in her space, on her terms. Elena Brennan watched from the back of the room, her expression unreadable. After the students left for recess, she approached him. "Thank you for coming," she said. It was neither warm nor cold. It was professional. Then she added, "The demonstration on refraction was clearer than the one in our textbook." It was, perhaps, the highest praise she could offer, an acknowledgement of his competence in her domain. He nodded. "The textbook overcomplicates it. The wonder is in the simple effect." They stood in the empty classroom, two professionals who understood complexity, for a moment in agreement. The public story reached its official end with a short article in the local paper titled "School Implements New Communication Training After Incident." It quoted the district's new initiatives on inclusive family engagement and mentioned no names. The viral storm had moved on, chewing through other scandals and heartbreaks, but the private changes were more enduring. Leo received a letter from his former university, an offer to return as a visiting researcher, part-time, with a flexible schedule. The dean had seen the news. The letter was gracious, acknowledging his circumstances and the value of his mind. Leo framed it, but did not reply immediately. The offer represented a door back to a world he thought he had closed forever. It forced him to ask a question he'd avoided. Could he be both the father Emma needed and the scientist he was? The choice no longer felt like a sacrifice, but a potential integration. For Elena, the transformation was quieter but more radical. She didn't become a different teacher overnight, but she eliminated public shamming from her toolkit. She replaced her homework accountability chart with a concept mastery check-in. She began holding 5-minute check-in chats with students who seemed distracted, asking, "Is everything okay?" instead of "Why isn't this done?" The shift was subtle, but her students felt it. The tension in her classroom, which she had mistaken for discipline, began to ease. The final surprising detail emerged not from a news report, but from a grant application. 6 months after the auditorium incident, the Pinewood School District, citing a need for innovative community partnerships, approved a modest pilot program. It was a weekly after-school science club for kids who struggled with traditional math instruction. The proposal was submitted by a teacher, Elena Brennan. The listed community partner and volunteer consultant was Leo Mercer. The club's stated goal was making abstract concepts tangible. It was funded, neither sought publicity for it. It was, in essence, a private peace treaty built around helping other children who didn't fit the standard mold. Emma Mercer finished 5th grade with improved marks in math and a first-place ribbon in the science fair for a project on photon behavior. Her father helped her build the apparatus, but the question had been her own. Can light remember? On the last day of school, she brought home a card for her father. It was a handmade thank you note from her entire class. Scrawled in various handwriting were messages like "Thanks for the prism" and "Science is cool." At the bottom, in careful, teacher-perfect cursive, was written, "Thank you for sharing your curiosity with us, E. Brennan." Leo put the card on the refrigerator. It stayed there for years. The Nobel medal remained in its storage box. He eventually accepted the university's part-time role, working 2 days a week while Emma was at school, his mind once again dancing with equations. He was neither the reclusive genius nor the defeated dad. He was something more sustainable, a balanced man. The incident left a permanent scar on the school's protocols. The district implemented a mandatory training module for all staff on non-judgmental parent communication, using the case study, anonymized, of a parent with non-traditional expertise and invisible constraints. It became a standard part of new teacher orientation. The scandal, in the end, created a systemic antibody. On a Saturday morning a year later, Leo and Emma were at their favorite pancake house. At a nearby table, a young mother was struggling with a toddler and a pile of paperwork, looking overwhelmed. Leo watched for a moment, then caught the waitress's eye. "Please put that table's coffee on my bill," he said quietly, "and send over an extra stack of pancakes." He didn't introduce himself, he didn't explain. He simply offered a small kindness, one that asked for no recognition, that assumed nothing about the recipient's story. It was the lesson learned, translated into action. The story of the condescending teacher and the Nobel laureate dad was never really about fame versus obscurity. It was about visibility. It was about the gap between what we see of each other's struggles and the vast, hidden reality beneath. Leo Mercer chose to make his greatest achievement the raising of his daughter, and in doing so, he inadvertently taught a teacher, a school, and a watching public a lesson more valuable than any prize. That dignity is quiet, that struggle is universal, and that sometimes the most profound expertise is knowing what not to say. So what does this story leave us with? Not just a viral moment of comeuppance, but a permanent question. How many people in our everyday lives are we misunderstanding based on the sliver of their story we see? The parent who misses a meeting, the coworker who seems disengaged, the quiet neighbor, each carrying unspoken chapters of loss, sacrifice, or even extraordinary achievement. The research we touched on earlier proves this isn't an isolated problem. From the systemic pressures that push hundreds of thousands of parents out of careers, to the educational practices that mistake shame for discipline, we are all navigating systems that often see efficiency more clearly than they see people. Leo Mercer's hidden Nobel Prize was just a dramatic symbol for a universal truth. Everyone has a hidden magnitude. Everyone is more than the single role we assign them. This incident forced a teacher to retrain, a school district to rewrite its protocols, and a father to reconcile two halves of his identity. But its real victory was quieter. It was in the after-school science club that gave struggling kids a new way to learn. It was in the coffee anonymously paid for. It was in the understanding that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is not to defend your own achievements, but to protect someone else's chance to be ordinary. The next time you're quick to judge a missed deadline, a forgotten signature, or a quiet person in the corner, remember the dad in the navy sweater. Remember that the most profound discoveries aren't always made in labs. They're made in the quiet spaces of human empathy, in the choice to assume the best, and in the courage to offer a seat at the table before you know the resume of the person asking for one. If this story changed your perspective, if it made you think about the hidden struggles and quiet triumphs of the people around you, then share it. Leave a comment below with the word "seen" if you've ever been misunderstood, or "see" if this reminds you to look deeper. And hit that subscribe button for more documentaries that explore the extraordinary hidden within the ordinary. Because the world is full of unwritten Nobel Prizes, waiting not for a ceremony, but for a moment of simple human recognition. Thanks for watching.